Welcome to the Immeasurably More podcast. I'm Erin, here with my mom, Jill. And if you're new here, we recently changed the name of the podcast to the Immeasurably More podcast. Previously, it was called the Light Your Heart with Hope podcast. So we now changed it to the Immeasurably More podcast. And if you're wondering where the name came from, the meaning behind it, you can go back and listen to a few weeks ago where we shared why we chose to name this podcast the Immeasurably More podcast.
Because
God is immeasurably more.
Yes, and he's able to do exceedingly abundantly, immeasurably more. And we have experienced that even in the midst of all of the heartbreak, the mountains, the valleys, the ups and downs, the hurt, the pain, the suffering, the grief. Even in the midst of all of that, God proved to be immeasurably more that he is, and that he can do and is doing immeasurably more. So this was all led by God, and I'm so excited. And we also decided that in order to start this new, fresh rebrand, that we would share our stories. We've never done that before. We've never done that on the podcast. We've shared parts of our stories, our mental health stories we have both shared. And I shared part of my testimony. In fact, it was the very first episode on Light Your Heart with Hope. Mm-hmm. And that still did not include everything that I wanted to share. So we were able to do that. And now, Erin, it's your turn to share your testimony. Maybe you aren't familiar with the word testimony. It's your story. It's ultimately, that's what it is. And we're giving testimony to what God has done in our lives. And that includes, you know, from the moment we took our first breath to this very moment right now, and everything in between, and all the ups and downs, and all of the things that God has allowed us to walk through, and where we are right now in our relationship with him. And it's always, there's an ebb and flow. It's always changing, but God never changes. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so I'm just in awe of all that he has done for our family and in our lives, and especially your life, Erin. And I'm so thankful that I get to sit across from you right now and listen to you share your story.
Well, and to the listener, I believe that when you listen to our stories, Mom, you shared your story, and we have my dad's story coming up. But I think that through listening to our stories, our testimonies of what God has done in our life, that they will see that God did immeasurably more, and that he continues to do immeasurably more. And so it really goes perfectly with this podcast. And I think it's a great way to really kick off the rebrand is by sharing the immeasurably more stories that God has written for us.
Right. And so people can know, you know, you might be joining this podcast today.
Right.
You know, this might be your first time. I don't know, you know, you came upon the Immeasurably More podcast in whatever way you came here, and you have no idea who we are. And we want to get to know you too. And that's the thing. We want to be able to have a relationship with our listeners in some way, shape, or form. And so I think the best way to do that is to share stories. Mm-hmm. And we will be doing a lot of that moving forward. We will be sharing other people's stories and their journeys. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. So should we dive in?
Yes.
I'm a little nervous. The only time I've shared my testimony is, Mom, you and I have done a few speaking engagements.
Right.
But the last one was a while ago. And so I don't know. I'm a little nervous, but I mean, I'm just going to share what God has done in my life from the beginning until now. So I'm just going to start with growing up as a Kelly. I actually wrote a book called Kelly Tough, and a chapter in the book is called Growing Up Kelly. And for those of you who maybe are new to this podcast and have no idea who we are, my dad's name is Jim Kelly. He played for the Buffalo Bills. He is a Hall of Fame quarterback. So I grew up in the Kelly family, but there's a lot of pressure that comes with being Jim Kelly's daughter. And I grew up in the spotlight of Buffalo, New York. Our family was always in the spotlight, which is a blessing. It is a blessing that people know who we are because we're able to share our story and what God has done. And that has been a huge blessing, but it was also hard growing up. But to give more background behind that, I grew up in a Christian household for my entire life. Mom, you were saved, I believe, when I was 2 years old. Yes.
Yes. Well, a little after that, because it was a year and a half after Hunter was diagnosed that I started to seek after God. So you would have been like 3-ish.
Okay. Yeah. Well, all I remember was Jesus and learning about him. And I'm so thankful that you and grandma really raised me to love Jesus and to seek after him. And I just remember my entire growing up was filled with scripture and listening to worship music. And we really needed that life to fill our home. My younger brother, Hunter, was diagnosed with Krabbe. I mean, Krabbe affects every single part of your body. He was completely disabled. And yet I always saw him as able, always, because he was just my brother. And so I've told you many times, Mom, that those were the best years of my life. Those were the most joy-filled years of my life, the most life-filled years of my life. And that is because of Jesus. That's because he impacted your life and you got saved. And then the relationship that you had with Jesus impacted my life and Hunter's life and Cam's life. And it's just absolutely incredible looking back on all that God did. And I learned so much through Hunter's life. And the most important thing is that I learned more about Jesus. I learned who Jesus was. I saw Jesus radiating through Hunter's life, and Hunter was never able to speak a word. And yet his life reflected Christ in an incredible way. And I know that our family wouldn't be saved if it wasn't for Hunter's life and for his suffering. And God just brought us to him in that.
I know this is your testimony, but can I share some things about you?
Of course.
One very clear memory that I have, because, it's interesting. I don't remember a lot, but there are specific things that I remember. And one of those moments was when we came home after finding out about Hunter's diagnosis. And I was sitting on the couch holding Hunter and I was weeping. I couldn't believe that we were just told that he wouldn't live to see his second birthday. And so I was so desperate and so heartbroken. And I just sat there. I just remember just a shell of myself sitting there on the couch holding Hunter. And I just was so overwhelmed with sorrow and grief and confusion. I was so confused, and Grandma was there. And I just remember you coming over and sitting with us and looking at me and say, Mommy, it's going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay, Mommy. Everything is going to be okay. I remember that so clearly because in my heart, I was like, no, it's not. It's not going to be okay at all. But yet you comforted me. It was so simple and so pure and so innocent. And you were so little and you had no idea what was going on, but you knew to comfort me. Yeah. Which was such a beautiful thing. And, you didn't share because you obviously didn't experience being born because you didn't even know. But your birth, Erin, was such a gift to my life and Daddy's as well. And everyone. I mean, you were the firstborn on my side as far as grandchildren too for Grandma and Grandpa. So your life has marked my life in so many ways from the moment that I found out that I was pregnant with you. And it's such an overwhelming gift to be a mom and such a blessing. And you being my firstborn and now you and I being able to do this podcast is, again, immeasurably more than I could have ever asked or imagined. So sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did, especially because there are things that I don't remember as a little girl, but I do remember you sharing that story when you've shared your testimony before. And, in terms of saying that everything was going to be okay, you're right. Everything wasn't going to be okay. And yet growing up, everything was in my mind. And I believe that that is a gift from God, that I didn't see Hunter as being sick.
Right.
But I also think that that was one of the hardest aspects of Hunter going to heaven. He went to heaven when I was 10 years old. And yes, it was a shock for all of us, but I just remember it being such a shock to me more than I can even fathom. And that's because I never thought that day would come,
right?
Because I didn't recognize how sick Hunter was. I didn't realize that it was a terminal illness. And I think because there was so much life in our family. We lived with Hunter. We took him snowmobiling and horse riding and all of the things. We treated Hunter like he was living because he was.
Right.
And so him going to heaven when I was 10 years old, and a 10-year-old girl doesn't know how to grieve.
No.
I had no idea how to grieve. And yet I have looked back at journal entries from those years following Hunter going to heaven, and I was so desperate for heaven. I was so desperate to see Hunter again. I was broken and just missing him, but I didn't know what that even meant.
Right.
A 10-year-old girl doesn't know what grief is. And I truthfully didn't grieve until several years ago.
Well, and I too didn't know how to help you in your grief.
Well, because you were grieving too. Yeah.
Because I was grieving too. But if I can just kind of backtrack a little bit, you were a caregiver from a very young age. That was part of who you are and who you were. And it's very interesting because I'll never forget when you started to ask about the serious things about God. I was a new believer. You were 2 years old, almost 3, when I came to faith in Christ. So this is all new to me. So I'm growing in my faith and you're just there.
Yeah.
You're just there growing up. You're little, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, those first 10 years of your life, I'm growing in my faith. Grandma is growing in her faith. She's there basically helping me. You were raised by grandma and me and daddy, of course, but daddy, he shares his testimony and there's a lot of that in that. And so I'm not going to go into that, but you were a part of everything that we did. Everything that, we were doing with Hunter, you were always there. You were watching. And that's one thing about you that hasn't changed. You observe and you watch and you take it all in. And you always had so many questions and you wanted to know more about Jesus because we would freely talk about him and we had worship music on in the house all the time and we were learning. So of course, I mean, that's what we're trying to gain understanding and knowledge about God and learn at the same time as trying to take care of your brother. And I was taking care of you. And I was so desperate for help and hope. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I was just knowing what I could do. And that was to seek after God in the only way that I knew how. And there you were the entire time. And I'll never forget you asking, well, how do I go to heaven? Do you remember wanting to know about God and praying the prayer of salvation? Do you remember praying for your dad all the time? You were always praying for him and you always wanted him to pray with you, the prayer of salvation. Do you remember that at all?
I vaguely remember some of those things. That was so long ago.
Right.
But I do remember, especially with Dad, having this longing for him to know Jesus. And you have told me the story about when I gave my life to Christ. And so that picture is in my mind, but I don't remember all of childhood. But I do, one of the things I remember is that I loved Jesus and I didn't fully understand who he was, but I loved him.
Right.
That's the biggest thing that I remember. And to go back to what you were sharing, how, you were growing in your faith. And I believe that is one of the most important things is how you live out your life, how you live out your faith. And that goes for everybody, everybody who's a believer. I really think that other people who aren't believers, they look at how you act. They look at how you live your life. It's not necessarily everything that you say. It's not about preaching God to people. It's about living your life out for Christ, being an example of who he is. And you did that in my life, Mom. And Grandma did that in my life. And when I say that I was praying for Dad, it was because he wasn't saved at the time. And because I knew Jesus, even at a young age, my heart longed for Dad to know who Christ was. And that was extremely important to me. And yes, Dad eventually gave his life to Christ. It was definitely an answer to my little girl prayers who had prayed for him my entire life. It's amazing to see how God is still doing a work in his life, and just to trace it back to the prayers of you, Mom, the prayers of so many people praying for Dad, but even my little innocent prayers when I didn't really fully understand what I was praying. I just knew that I wanted my dad to know Jesus.
You had faith like a little child, and it was so beautiful to watch it unfold, even as I was growing in my faith, just to watch you. And honestly, and this might sound so crazy, but after you had prayed that you wanted Jesus to be your Lord, basically, I don't think you certainly didn't use those words, but God knew what you meant,
Right.
right? You were like a changed little girl. And I know that sounds so crazy, but you were. And you would tell on yourself. I don't know if you remember this part. No matter
I do
what,
remember that part.
if you did anything wrong at all, you would tell on yourself. You would come and tell us.
Yeah.
We just thought, who is this kid that is telling us what she's done wrong instead of us having to catch you? But it seemed like no matter what you were taught, that you learned and you obeyed. You have been a little people pleaser since you were a little girl. And you know, that is a beautiful thing and a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you've experienced both. You've experienced what it's like to struggle with being a people pleaser.
Yeah.
But even as a little person, as a little girl growing up, you always wanted to please us. And you did.
Well, and I think my heart behind that was to please God.
Right.
And I probably didn't realize that as a young kid, but growing up, I do think part of it was to please God. And it's interesting because I think that people pleasing aspect and wanting to please God, there is a valuable side of that, but there's also a tough piece to that where it doesn't help to be seeking after people's approval. And even God, I think I got to a point where I was striving so much to please God that it hindered my relationship with him because I thought that I had to be perfect to come to God. And just to kind of go back to what I said about being Jim Kelly's daughter, because that is a part of my story. Being his daughter is a gift and it's a part of my story, but that was part of my people-pleasing nature, my nature to be a perfectionist, because I definitely was. And I feel like I'm trying to be a recovering perfectionist.
Oh, kind of like
I'm still working on it.
I'm a recovering control freak.
Yeah.
Like, kind of the same thing.
Yeah, kind of the same thing. But in your episode, Mom, you talked about how growing up, you started to struggle with searching for love in all the wrong places and questioning love. And that was like the thread that went throughout your entire testimony. And I feel like the thread throughout my life was searching for acceptance, searching for validation, searching for wanting to be loved, kind of like you, but in a different way. I wanted to be known as Erin. I wanted to be known as something more than just Jim Kelly's daughter. And if you're listening, you might be like, well, being Jim Kelly's daughter is amazing. Like, how cool is that? Well, yes, it does come with a lot of value and there is good in that, but it's also hard when you're known as that. And so I think throughout my life, I really wrestled with my identity, who I am. And when you spend your life trying to please other people, when you spend your life trying to be perfect, not only in the eyes of your family and God, but in the eyes of people who don't even know you. And that is a hard aspect of growing up in a family where you are in the spotlight, is you think that you have to be perfect for people who don't even know you, people who don't know your story. And that's a heavy burden to carry. And so I wrestled with that for my entire life. And it's something that sometimes is still hard and something that God is working on my heart in. But in the midst of everything that I've been through, and I'll get into more of that, but there is that thread of searching for my identity and searching for my identity in all the wrong places. And eventually coming to realize that my identity is found in Christ alone and that he doesn't expect me to be perfect. He doesn't expect any of us to be perfect. He wants us to come to him just as we are, no matter what that looks like. And so to kind of back up and fast forward, Hunter went to heaven when I was 10, and it really impacted my life going forward. I wrestled a lot in silence. I struggled with my grief in silence because I didn't understand it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know who I could go to. Mom, you were wrestling with your own grief, and I realized that now it was difficult. And I started this cycle of burying my pain. And it's something I continued to do and continued to do with every hardship that I went through in life. So that really continued all throughout middle school and high school. And one of the things I remember was I felt so alone. And when you hide your pain, when you bury your pain, you're going to feel alone. Because when you don't allow people into your life, when you don't allow them into the painful aspects of your story, you're going to feel isolated. You're going to feel alone. But I didn't know what else to do at the time. So I kept pushing through. I kept being quote unquote Kelly tough. And I took that out in a lot of different ways through perfectionism, through people pleasing. It was my way of hiding the pain, because if I could act perfect, if I could have it all together, then no one would see the pain that I was in. And if I did that, then I didn't have to address the pain that I was in. And it continued to impact me. My junior and senior year of high school, I started really seeking after wanting people to see me. I went on diets and detoxes, trying to change my outward appearance because the inward side of me was in so much pain. And so I continued to seek after trying to change the outside in hopes that the inside would change, that I would finally be happy, that I would finally be satisfied, and I wouldn't feel so alone. Because maybe if people saw me as having it all together, then they wouldn't be able to ever see that I was struggling. And so this continued on and continued on. In high school, the end of my senior year of high school was when my dad was first diagnosed with cancer. And I'll never forget the moment Dad sat all of us down and told us that he had oral cancer and that they had to do surgery to remove it. And in that moment, part of me was afraid. And then part of me was just like, okay, well, they'll just remove it and he'll be fine. And that's exactly kind of what happened.
Yeah.
They removed it and we thought, okay, the cancer's gone. And after they removed the cancer and we thought everything was better, that fall, I went to college at Liberty University. I started my freshman year. I was severely homesick.
No. I had to show some serious tough love.
Oh, yeah.
Even
wanted to leave.
my dad was like, Jill, I'll go get her.
Well, Liberty is in Virginia. And so it was far away and I was very, very homesick. But you did have tough love. And I'm thankful you did, because staying there was one of the best decisions I've ever made. And so to fast forward to the spring of my freshman year, Mom, you and I ended up taking a trip with Liberty to Israel. And it was on that trip to Israel that we found out that Dad's cancer had come back. And I literally will never forget the moment. We were in Jerusalem, and how you got a call in Jerusalem
Exactly
is beyond me. It had to have been God, because we did not have cell service. And yet you got a call from Dad's brother telling you that the cancer was back and that they had rushed him to the hospital because he was in so much pain and the cancer had returned and it was aggressive. He ended up having to do chemo and radiation. I was still in school, and yet I knew that I had to be there. And Dad was getting treatment in New York City, and I was still in Virginia during I don't even know how long we were there.
It seemed like forever.
It seemed like forever, but every Friday I would fly from Virginia to New York City, and I would stay until Sunday night, and then I would fly back to Virginia and then do it all again on Friday. And I did that the entire time Dad was there. While I am so thankful that I did do that, I'm so thankful that I got to be there throughout Dad's entire time in treatment. It was really hard. And that entire time I did what I did in middle school. I did what I did in high school. I buried the pain. I pretended like I was okay. I always had a smile on my face. I rarely ever allowed myself to cry and to let it all out. To be going back and forth from school to Dad's treatment, it takes a lot out of you emotionally, physically, but I just kept pushing through and pushing through and pushing through because that's all I knew to do.
As I'm listening to you say all this, I'm thinking, I myself was so caught up in taking care of your dad and being there for him, and just, everything in life stops. Like the ordinary it's just like, putting a load of washing or something like that. All the ordinary things in life you learn to appreciate when you're in a hospital. Everything in life stopped, and we were there every single day going to treatments and you going through all of that. Now, even while you're saying it, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, you flying back and forth. And yes, what a gift. And thank you so much for being there for me. You were there for me, Erin. And see, that's the thing. The story I shared in the very beginning of this, you were there for me.
Yeah.
Coming up to me when you were a little peanut saying, Mommy, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's like, it's almost as if from a very young age, you took upon this role of caregiver, like I said, and you never stopped being that caregiver. You never stopped having that desire to help and to reach out and to be compassionate, and to a fault in the sense that you also carried your own pain and you were not able to release your own pain because you had gone through so much, the loss of your brother and grieving that you didn't even grieve, and you were so young and didn't understand, and all of that. You can just see the steps in your journey of how you carried all of that and you continued to carry all of that. And the truth is you can't continue to carry all that.
Right.
And I know you're going to get to that part of your story, and where God in his mercy and his grace, you get to the end of yourself and you get to the end of being able to do all that you can do in your own strength. And that is a defining moment for your life, I know. But you coming and being there was such a gift to your dad, and you were always a pillar of strength, always.
Which is hard.
Right.
Which is very hard. But at the time, it was so natural to me. It's just what I did. It's what I knew was to be strong. And there is so much value in that. But at the same time, when you don't give yourself permission to feel, to break down, to not be okay, it's eventually going to catch up to you.
Right.
But to just move on in my story, Dad ended up going through chemo and going through radiation. And thankfully the cancer was gone and he was in remission. And I went back to school and just continued to live as a college student. And it was.
Can I just tell one college student story?
Oh yeah, I don't know where you're going with it.
I don't know if this is like the best parenting advice. In fact, I know it's not the best parenting advice we gave you, but you were so. This is another thing, and I don't know if this is part of. I think it's two things. I think it's the work of God in your life that you wanted to live above reproach. You were very mindful about the decisions that you made all the time, but it was also this sort of maybe defense mechanism, this perfectionism, you always went hard at everything you did. Like it didn't matter if it was basketball in high school, no matter what you were doing, you went full on 125%. Like it was never just, you always did more than was expected of you, always. Right. And so here you are in college and there was a party and we knew about it because you had told, there's a party in Jack Ronaldo who went to high school with you, went to Liberty too. And I was like, Erin, go to the party. Go to the party. Here I am. I'm your mom and I'm telling you to go to a college party. But it was almost like I wanted you to experience what you were not willing to experience. And your response was, Mom, I don't want someone to see me there and know who I am and think something other than what's true. Right. Meaning that, well, she's a party girl. She goes to parties. Yeah. Which there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with going to a party. And I said to you, I was like, Erin, you could just go to the party. That doesn't mean you have to drink and get drunk and, do all those sort of things that a lot of kids do at these college parties. Yeah. Just go and meet people. It was just, and you would not go.
Oh my gosh. I literally remember that. I think this was like the beginning of my sophomore year. Because the story you're telling is my freshman year. Right. And I was like, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to my dorm. I'm going to my class. I'm going home. That was, you know what? I was growing. But the beginning of my sophomore year, I went to one party. I will never forget this. I walked up to the party. There were a million people outside this house. And a basketball hoop almost fell on me. Fell right in front of me. I said to my best friend, Shelby, I said, we're leaving. We're leaving now. I am not staying here. I almost just died by a basketball hoop. I'm really not meant to be at this party. But the interesting thing is, and little did I know till later, but Parker, my future husband, was at the same party.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
didn't
And I
know
didn't,
that.
yes, I didn't even know he was there. I found out way later. He was like, oh yeah, I was at that party. And I was like, oh my gosh. So to transition into meeting Parker, this is actually a really funny story. And I feel like I should wait to tell this story when I'm with Parker, but I'll just give a little backstory. So we met through a mutual friend. The funny part of the story is that he actually saw me on ESPN, which is really weird. But he saw me on ESPN. I was doing a Father's Day special about my dad. And he saw me on ESPN. From his side of the story, he was like, who's that girl? His mom said, she goes to Liberty. He said, I'm going to meet her. And so he Instagram stalked me, found out who our mutual connect was. And my friend who he had connected with, she was like, so this baseball player at Liberty, his name's Parker Bean. He wants to meet you. And I was like, Parker Bean, like what a last name. That's interesting. And that was literally my first thought. And I was like, okay, you know what? It won't hurt. Like, fine, I'll meet him. That's fine. And so it was the beginning of sophomore year. And crazy thing is, Parker ended up coming over to our townhouse to meet me. And he met me, you, Mom,
Right.
my grandma,
Yep.
and my best friend, all in one setting. And I was like, oh my gosh, the pressure is on for this kid right now.
Right. And hey, if he can withstand that kind of pressure, then
Exactly. Exactly.
That's a green flag, not a red one.
Right. And I have to tell this part of the story because it's funny. Within the first, I don't know, 10 minutes of Parker being there, we were all sitting out on like the back patio, just kind of asking this kid some questions, just trying to get to know him. And Mom, the first thing you said to him is, so what's your testimony? Oh my gosh, my heart dropped in that moment. I was like, there is no way she just asked him that.
Well, that was like a natural. You know what?
I mean, it is
love
the
this
most
story.
important part
It's the most important
of
part.
someone's life.
All I want to know is his relationship with God. Because guess what? If he doesn't have a relationship with Jesus, if he doesn't know God, how's he going to be able to love you? How's he going to be able to be in a relationship with you? He needs the most important relationship in his life to be solid, right?
Yeah. Which I agree with.
And I can't even believe I did that either. And I won't do that to Cameron. I already told her. I promised her. Trust me, I will not. But that is the most important thing about someone. What their faith walk is with the Lord is the most important thing about them.
Yeah.
And I believe that to this day because everything else stems from that. Every other relationship is impacted by that. Your love, your joy, who you are at your very core stems from your relationship with God. And so, yeah, poor Parker. And
Poor
he was
Parker.
just like, and
Hey, he stayed.
He stayed.
He stayed.
You're married. So
Well, we're married.
hey,
So
that
clearly it wasn't
a bad start.
Yeah,
It was
exactly.
a really good one.
It was a very good start. So yeah, Parker and I met. He stayed and hung out with me and my friends till like 10:30 at night.
I think we were like, when is he going to go?
I know. I think I said to you or Shelby or something, I was like, he's still here. Like, what is happening? He's still here.
Even after I put him on the spot.
I know. So he stayed and it was an amazing time. And honestly, after that, we kept hanging out. We kept spending time together. And there was just something different about him. And
there's something very different about you.
When I was with him.
Well, and you didn't care about us anymore. So we knew. I'll never forget. We picked you up at the airport. You would come home. I can't remember exactly why you came home, but
this was the first time bringing Parker to Buffalo.
Right. It was the first time bringing Parker to Buffalo. And, you are all about your family. We have a very, very close, strong relationship, family bond. And we were just like kind of shocked that you didn't want to sit next to us. Like you were totally like,
I like
totally
tuned you guys out.
Totally tuned us out. You were consumed with Parker. We were at a Sabres game and we were shocked. And we thought, oh my goodness, this is happening.
Yeah.
And you're our firstborn daughter. When Parker came into the picture, it was, whoa, I'm talking to grandma. I'm creeping on him on Instagram. I'm trying to find out as much as I can. I'm trying to protect you. And your dad is like, who's this? Oh no, he's an athlete. He's a baseball player. Don't you know the reputation that baseball players have? It's worse than football players. I mean, so all these things were going on.
Yeah.
And on our end of things
Right.
with your relationship with Parker.
Right. And it's interesting because with Parker, for the majority of our relationship, I had just this peace about him and just this comfort when I was with him. And I remember there were a few other guys at the time that wanted to meet me and get to know me because they had connected with the same mutual friend and said, "Can I meet Erin?" And
they probably saw you on ESPN too.
Oh, maybe. But honestly, after I met Parker, it was like, I didn't care about meeting anybody else.
And I couldn't understand that.
No, you were like, Erin, just meet them. I'm like, honestly, I don't care about anyone else.
Well, and I'm sure in the back of your mind too, because you've already mentioned this briefly, but I know that was kind of has been part of your story. Did these guys like me for me?
Oh, yeah. That was a very hard aspect.
Or is this because I'm Jim Kelly's daughter?
Right.
And you carried that throughout your
entire
whole
life.
Right. So are these friends my friends? Or is it because I'm Jim Kelly's daughter? So in the back of my mind too, I'm like, okay, well, he saw her on ESPN.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, he obviously knows it's Jim Kelly's daughter. And what does that mean to someone outside of our family unit? What does that mean? What I think was I could talk about Parker for a long time because we love and adore Parker and he is a godsend. And you didn't share yet, but I'm going to bring it up, how you would pray. I think 10 is your first journal entry for your future husband.
Yeah.
I remember finding that journal and I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You were praying for your future husband.
Oh yeah. Like a lot.
Yeah.
Like diligently
to
praying
him
for my
like
future
as if
husband.
you knew him already.
Yeah. Which is just crazy and a God thing. And I just made the decision that I wanted to save myself for my future husband, and praying for my future husband had a lot to do with that. And so part of it is changing the trajectory of the generations before me. Both you and Grandma had chosen not to do that. And Grandma had you before she was married, and you had me before you were married. And so it was just, it's a part of my story. And for a while, I think I made purity part of my identity. And it's not. It's a decision that I made and a decision that I'm thankful I made. I struggle sometimes sharing that aspect of my story because I never want anyone to think that I think that I'm better because I chose that route. It was a choice that I made because I wanted to honor God and my future husband. But I think for a while I made that part of my identity and who I was. But going forward, I told Parker that that's a decision that I made, and he respected that. And I believe that it has greatly impacted our marriage. And so Parker and we dated for about 4 years, I think. But we got married in January of 2018. Our entire relationship was a relationship of growing in Christ together, growing closer together. And I know that because we were seeking God together as a couple, that it set our marriage up for success in the long run.
Right.
And that we grew to love each other more because of our relationship with God. And honestly, I don't think I've ever shared this.
Oh.
But you know this, Mom, but less than a month before we got married, I had a little bit of a panic about getting married.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like on the verge of potentially calling off the wedding. And it was because I had prayed for my husband since I was little. And I just remember having this moment where I was like, God, is he the one? Deep down, I knew that he was, but there was this wrestling in me. Like, God, is this the man that you've chosen for me to live with for the rest of my life? And I took 3 days and I fasted and I prayed, and it was the hardest 3 days of my life. Like, I was facing a lifetime decision in that moment. And
I was there.
Yeah.
And I was fasting and praying with you.
Oh, it was like, it's painful even thinking about it. It was hard, but I just remember saying to God, I love you more and I want to honor you. So if this isn't the man you have for me, then I need you to let me know. And in that moment, I had spent time with God and I was praying and I was walking around our neighborhood and I literally just fell to my knees and I was crying and praying. And I just felt like in that moment, God was like, he's the one. But I felt like I had to get to that kind of like Abraham Isaac moment where I was willing to give up my greatest earthly love because I love Jesus more. And I really believe that God brought me to that moment to show me that I loved him more than my greatest earthly love. And I did obviously get married and I put Parker through the ringer with that one, but it was worth it because I knew with all my heart after that moment that Parker was going to be my forever.
Right.
At this time, Parker was in the minor leagues playing baseball for the Milwaukee Brewers. And so after we got married in January and shortly after we got married, he was in spring training in Arizona. And so Parker and I were out there for a bit, about a month or so, and we were staying at a friend's house. And the baseball life is no joke. And it's not the greatest thing. I did not like it either, but Parker was following his dream and he loved it. And so I was there with him every step of the way. And it was about, I feel like a month into spring training, and you and Dad and Cam had come out to see Parker and I and hang out with us, and Parker got released from the team, and that was his last season playing baseball. And at the time, none of us really understood why until shortly after. I don't know if it was the day after or a few days after. Yeah, it must have been a day after, if not a couple days after, we found out that Dad's cancer had come back. We all flew back to Buffalo. And shortly after, you, me, and Parker, Cam was still in school, you, me, and Parker flew to New York City because he was getting the surgery there that he needed to remove the cancer, and he was getting facial reconstruction surgery. I would say it was the worst bout of cancer that we have watched him go through. Yes, chemo and radiation were horrible, but none of us were prepared for that at all. But Parker and we believed that it was God's timing for him to be released, and he was able to be there with me as my husband, taking care of my dad. You, me, and Parker, we all took turns staying overnight with Dad because he didn't want to be alone in the hospital. And so we were with him, and we lived in and out of a hospital and a hotel room in New York. And this was the beginning of Parker and I being married, like the very beginning of our marriage. And so hard.
And I remember, like I said, I mean, there's certain things visually that I remember. And I remember Parker taking care of your dad. And I had been out of the room for a reason at the hospital. And then I walked in and Parker was like doing something on your dad's shoulders or moving his arm or something like that. That to me was like him laying down his life to take care of somebody else. And it was your dad. And I loved Parker before y'all were married, but that solidified this relationship in my heart regarding your husband, that this man is going to do and take care of Erin, because I saw him taking care of your dad. And that meant so much to me, and I'll never forget it.
Well, and he had literally just lost his dream. Lost his job, and he set all of that aside to be there for me, to be there for Dad and you. And it was extremely difficult for him. It was extremely difficult for all of us.
You know, when I think back to all that we have experienced as a family, especially everything with Hunter and then everything that went on with your dad, there is no possible way that we survive that without God. It's just, there's no way.
Right.
I can't even believe we're still standing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think, wow, God, there's just no way.
Well, and like I had shared earlier, how I really struggled with burying my pain and trying to be strong. I did the same thing during all of this. And when we first saw him after he got the surgery done, he was unrecognizable. And you were on one side of his bed and I was on the other. And I don't know if you remember this, but you started to cry. And I looked at you, I just shook my head. I'm like, no, like we have to hold it together. We have to hold it together for dad. Like he can't see us crying.
Right.
And I look back on it now. I was so used to shutting down in hard moments.
Right.
I was so used to burying my pain when things were the most painful.
And you hit it so well. You
I
became a
know.
master of hiding, really.
Yeah.
And I know that's part of your testimony that, when the floodgates opened,
Yeah.
I mean, everything started to flood out and you hit a lot and we never knew it. You were very good at it.
Well, I had spent my whole life doing it.
Right.
It came so natural to me to do that, especially in a hospital setting. Every time I've been in a hospital since, I can literally feel my mind and my body shut down and shut out everything. And yes, it's kind of a protective mechanism, but I don't even know how to kind of come out of it in those scenarios. But I definitely continue to bury my pain. And when you think about my story, as I've talked about trying to keep it all together and burying my pain, those are levels. At this time, when I was burying the pain of all that dad was going through, burying my fear, all of that was layers on top of my grief when I was 10 years old.
Right.
Like that had never gone anywhere. That had never been dealt with.
Well, really, even before you were 10, Erin, before Hunter went to heaven, I mean, you experienced all of the things that we all experienced with what Hunter was going through. You were there when the ambulance came and scooted your brother off to the hospital.
Yeah.
You were there in those very traumatic experiences. You were always there because you were always there.
Right.
And that in and of itself, even prior to you, at 10 years old and burying your grief, no, you were already doing that even before that as a defense mechanism, as, to protect yourself from all of the things, the fear, the
chaos,
all of the things, the unknown. There was so much that was unknown.
Right.
And so it's almost like from a very young age, you start to protect yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's just how you dealt with everything.
Right. It was a survival mechanism.
Exactly.
But yeah, so we went through that for what felt like an eternity. I felt like we were in New York City forever. Yeah. And when we came home throughout the whole summer, Parker and I lived with you guys. We helped take care of dad the entire summer. And then
Thank you, by the way.
It was natural. It's family. That's what we did.
Not always, though, Erin.
But that was what we did.
Yeah.
As a family,
exactly.
That's what we did.
Right.
And so in that fall, Parker and I moved back to Virginia and I went to law school at Liberty, which probably seems crazy because
she's not a lawyer.
I am not a lawyer and I didn't finish law school. But anyway, I started law school. Parker got a job in Lynchburg and we started our life as we felt like, we were a newly married couple, but we had just spent months in the hospital,
right,
in a hotel room, living with you guys. Like our marriage didn't feel like it started.
Right.
And then I went to law school. And if you're listening and you've been to law school, you know that you have no time apart from being in class or being in a book. And so I was busy a lot of the time. And it was hard for Parker and I to really grow together. We did, but it was hard because I was so busy with school and just going forward. It was really hard, but I loved it so much.
We loved it.
Yeah. It was weird. It was weird. I had never set out to be a lawyer, but I went and I went to law school and going into the second semester, right before I started my second semester, I remember I was texting you. I was in Virginia. I was talking to you, and to give background, I had been struggling with physical pain since I was in high school.
Right.
So since that senior year when I was struggling and trying to get the attention of wanting to be seen, overachieving, all of those things.
Over 1,000-point shooter.
Everything was overachieving. But since that time, I had been in physical pain. And throughout high school and college, I got multiple scans done, x-rays, MRI, CAT scans, a ton of blood work done. And every doctor told me that I was fine.
Well, and I remember going through all of that with you, and we did think it was because you went so hard and you were such an athlete.
Yeah, we thought it was
and so you were just like
basketball
expending yourself and just like putting it all out there, and you just went so hard in your body that your body was just in a lot of pain.
Well, and throughout college too, I was working out nonstop and just through the pain and really putting my body through a lot. So we thought maybe it was that, but I knew the whole time that something was wrong. And I remember coming out of doctor's offices with you and you being so thankful that everything was okay. And I would just be bawling. I'm like, but Mom, something's wrong.
Right.
It's not normal to be an 18-year-old and feel like you're 80.
Right.
And so that was something I had struggled with for a long time. And at this point in law school, I had said to you, I'm still in so much pain, and all the doctors telling me like I was perfectly healthy. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Something's wrong. And you said to me, maybe this is not physical, but maybe this is emotional weight you're carrying. In my mind, I was like, what do you mean? Like emotional, physical? How do those two things go together? That doesn't make sense. Now I know that they definitely do go together. And I was carrying a lot of emotional weight because of everything that I had buried and held on to. That takes a toll on your body.
Right.
It takes a toll on your mind, but a huge toll on your body.
Right.
And so within the first 2 months of being back at Liberty and going to school, I met with a friend of our family and I said, do you have anyone I can meet with? Because I need help. Something's not right. And I don't know if I'm carrying like emotional weight, but like I need to talk to someone. And he introduced me to someone who became an incredible friend of mine, a mentor. From there, it really started to unravel. I started to actually share the things that I had gone through. I had never talked about everything I went through with Hunter or with my dad or with just everything I had been struggling with for so long. And it was like the floodgates opened.
And also, I just want to add, and I think this weighed on you as well. And this was your closest friend in law school got in a car accident.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you were so devastated. It just seemed like there was one thing after the other.
Right.
After you got married and then daddy and then your best friend from law school. And it was just like, it
never stopped. It seemed like. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And more shoes kept dropping. And then like we just said, the floodgates opened.
Yeah. It's interesting because while it was like this weight off, like, oh my gosh, like I can actually talk about this and share this with someone and like just let it all out. The pain of talking about it and letting it out was so significant. And it spiraled my mental health. I just fell into a very dark depression, started having horrible panic attacks, was battling daily anxiety. And at this point, I was still in law school, just trying to get through every day of law school, waiting for the semester to be over. And once again, although I had started to talk about things, there was still this natural part of me that felt like I had to bury it and hide it. And
be tough.
Well, yeah.
Push through.
Yeah. Like,
Kelly
hello,
tough.
I was in law school. I had to push through. I had to be strong to finish school. And it was extremely difficult. And in the midst of this, I ended up going and seeing a counselor who specializes in eating disorders. And I had never come to terms with the fact that I had an eating disorder since high school. It was my coping mechanism. If I could control food, if I could control working out, if I could control my body, then I felt like I had control over my life that felt completely out of control. And so I started meeting with this counselor, and she was a counselor to help with depression and anxiety and the eating disorder. And as I was addressing everything and getting everything out in the open and into the light, everything seemed to be getting worse. And I didn't understand that. I was like, God, I don't understand. Like, why are you allowing things to get worse? This is supposed to help me. And little did I know at the time that I had to feel. I had to feel it all. I had to feel the pain. I had to feel the grief. I came to a point where I had prayed so much and begged God so much to relieve me and bring me out of the darkness that I just said, God, I'm done. I'm done with you just not coming through for me. I'm going to take matters into my own hands. I'm going to try to control every aspect of my life. I'm going to do what I need to do to get through the pain because you're not helping me. And that really was the first time where I really started to wrestle with my faith and wrestle in my relationship with God and seeking after the things of this world to try to take away the pain. And I share my full mental health story in another episode, but this went on for years. Just really battling depression and anxiety. And I went to a treatment place for depression and anxiety. I went to treatment for the eating disorder that had just really almost taken my life. And through all of this, there were moments where I just didn't want to wake up in the morning. That's just the honest truth. I was so desperate for relief. I was desperate for God to just rescue me from the place that I was in. I look back to even a year and a half ago, and I'm a different person today than I was then. It has taken me a very long time to get to where I am today, where I can say that God is using what the enemy meant for evil. He's using it for good. And that the pain that I went through, I'm seeing how God has used the pain and the heartbreak and the hiding to now meet people in their place of hiding, in their place of pain, and say that I've been there, and going after all the things of this world to find relief will not work. It doesn't help. And hiding what you're going through, hiding the pain, it'll eventually come up anyway. You can't hide it forever. You can't bury it forever. And I'm seeing how the darkest moments and seasons of my life are now meeting other people in their darkest seasons. And what a gift that is. As much as I would never, ever want to go through that dark season again, I'm thankful for where God has brought me and how he is using it to impact other people. And so today, I am still healing. I am still in counseling. I'm still walking through just the healing process, because healing isn't linear. It's not easy road. I don't think we're ever done healing, because life doesn't end on this side of eternity. Life will never be easy forever. There will always be pain on this side of eternity because we're not in heaven yet. And so I know that I am always healing. I'm always walking in healing. I'm so thankful for the people who walked alongside me in my darkest seasons, people that literally met me in the darkness and decided to stay. That's still sometimes beyond my comprehension, but amazing friends that I consider family who have helped me throughout this entire season. My incredible family, who you guys you never left my side. Parker, I mean, our marriage went through so much in that season, to the point where I didn't know how we were going to stay married. I don't know how we were going to make it through it, but God carried us through it. And Parker never wavered. Every step of the way, he was there. You and Dad and Cam, I mean, you and Dad were and still are just an incredible support for me. You just hugging me and being there for me, and sometimes not even saying anything. We talk a lot about that in our mental health episodes, but you did that for me, and you still do that for me. And Cam, I always tell her, I'm like, you've been my why for years. You're the reason why I've chosen to fight another day. I'm so thankful that as my sister and my best friend, she's been there for me. And even the other day, she was like, I'm here for you. I just want you to know I'm here for you. And so, yeah, I mean, that's where I am today. I'm a work in progress, and I'm so thankful that I know that God's not done with me yet, and he's not done with my story, and he's still writing my story. But I'm thankful for this opportunity to share what God has done. And I hope that this encourages the person that's listening, that, your story isn't over.
Right. And it's interesting, you didn't mention your diagnosis of Lyme.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Well, that was.
Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah,
Right
definitely.
before COVID.
Yeah. I'm surprised I forgot about Lyme, since I'm in pain right now. But I mean, the last 5 years have been a lot. And honestly, there's a lot that I have forgotten just because of how dark things were. But Lyme did play a huge does play a huge role in my story, even still today.
Right.
In 2020, March of 2020, literally right before the pandemic hit, I went to the Amen Clinic and I got a SPECT scan of my brain. And what they saw on my scan is what led them to test me for Lyme disease. And so they tested me, and I found out a few days before my birthday, actually, that I was diagnosed with Lyme disease. And I remember I was sitting in my bedroom with Parker, and we were both on the phone with my doctor. And when we got off the phone, Parker just started crying. And he was like, this isn't fair. Like, all that you've been through, all you're going through, like, I don't understand. Like, why does this have to happen? And I had this weird peace that just came over me. And I think it's because I had battled so much physical pain for so long that it was this relief of, now I have an answer. I have a why behind my pain. And it felt like a doctor finally believes me that something is wrong. And so from there to this day, I have worked with the Amen Clinic and tried a lot of different options, a lot of different medications to treat this disease that is very complicated. And a lot of people deal with Lyme, and not enough people talk about it. Not enough doctors talk about it, but it's a very real thing. And it's something that, I've been treating since 2020, and I am still treating it in February. So about, 6 months ago or something. I'm bad at math, but I received another treatment called SOT treatment, and it takes time to work. And I'm hopeful, and I'm praying that it does help and takes the pain away and all of those things. But right now, Lyme has definitely impacted my life in a lot of ways. It's impacted my physical ability to do a lot of things. I push through still, like I always have, but it is harder. To this day, I'm still healing. I'm still working with doctors. And to anyone that is listening that may have Lyme, I understand. And I see you, and I'm praying for you. And so, yeah, I totally forgot to mention Lyme. How I forgot to mention that, but I did. And it is a big part of my story. So
when I sit here, I think Krabbe disease, cancer, mental health, anxiety, depression, eating disorder, Lyme. I'm like, what? But at the same time, we're talking about an immeasurably more God who's able to, in the midst of all those things and more, we don't talk about everything, right? We don't share every single detail, but he is immeasurably more, and he is able to do immeasurably more in the midst of all of those things. Yeah. And there was so many times, from this perspective, from your mom's perspective, from my perspective of everything that you were going through, where I was just crying out to God so many times, God, please, in the tears and just this overwhelming sense of, God, where are you? Mm-hmm. And I would run to where I knew to go, and that was to David and Job, the people in the Word of God who said the same things, who experienced so much pain, so much heartbreak and struggle, and what they did with that, and continued to do with that. And that's what we continue to do. We are a work in progress, and we have no idea what tomorrow holds, but we know who holds tomorrow, and we know who holds this moment. And that does not make all the suffering disappear. Right. It doesn't make any of what you've shared easier. It just gives us the rock upon which we stand. It gives us the foundation and the place to go with our suffering, and to know that no matter what, he's with us, and he's never going to leave, and he's never going to forsake us, and that we don't have to be afraid or discouraged. And when we are, we run to him, and we keep running back to him in all of the things that you've been through. That is the defining thing about your life, is that you've continued to run to God.
The fact that I'm sitting here doing this podcast, sharing my story, is an absolute miracle.
It is.
And if you don't believe in an immeasurably more God, all you have to do is listen to our story, and you can believe that there is an immeasurably more God who does immeasurably more. And it's because of that immeasurably more God that I can sit here and share my story. just to encourage the listener. I hope that hearing my story encourages you in the midst of your own story, that God is not finished with you yet.
Yes.
He is able and does do immeasurably more than all you could ever ask or imagine. When you feel like he's left you, when you feel like he's not there, I promise you that he is. He hasn't gone anywhere. Ask God why. I did a million times. I asked God why, and I begged him to take me out of the valley of the shadow of death, but God proved himself to be faithful in it. And he walked me through the valley of the shadow of death. He didn't necessarily pull me out when I begged him to, but he promised to walk through with me, and he did. And he will do the same for you.
That is just so powerful. And we don't share our testimony because we've arrived. We're not sharing our testimony because everything has been resolved and it's perfect and everything's great.
Right.
No, you're daily still in the thick of a lot, and we are still pushing through and we're persevering. But it's because the joy set before us. It's because what we know about God and his character, and because we know what's coming, and that he has a perfect plan, and that our life does not end with our last breath. It doesn't.
Amen.
We have an eternity to look forward to. And because of that joy, because of what Jesus has done for us, we continue to persevere and we continue to share the hope that we have.
Right.
I mean, that's why we're doing this. And the fact that God has given us a testimony and he's called us to share that. And I'm so proud of you, Erin. I can't even begin to just articulate how amazed I am by your walk with God and his faithfulness first and foremost, but your faithfulness in the fire to him. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you were going to go, you went in the fire. You've been in the fire. You're still in the fire, but he's still God.
Yeah.
And he's still the one that you're going to point to. And he's still the one that you run to. And that looks ugly, and it looks all the things that it is when it's happening and when you're going through it. But your faithfulness is amazing to me, and your ability to continue to persevere. And yet I'm also in awe and so thankful for the floodgates being opened, and for you going to counseling, and for you getting the help that you need, and for you being open about your feelings and sharing your feelings. And you're teaching so many people, and I'm one of the people you teach every single day. So thank you. I love you so much. So much.
I love you. I just want to, lastly, I know I said this before, but just thank all the people that are listening that have helped me throughout this journey. I could list their names, but I won't, because you know who you are. I love you, and I'm so thankful for you, and you have impacted my life more than you will ever know. You are part of the reason why I'm sitting here sharing my testimony. Thank you to my incredible family. I love you, Mom.
I love you so much.
I love you guys. And thank you to my counselor. She's absolutely incredible and continues to help me to keep going every single day. Keep feeling.
It's coming out of
Feelings aren't
hiding.
facts.
Right.
But
can't heal in hiding.
Exactly. Choose your hard. I mean, I could go on and on with all of my counselors' one-liners. I love her. She's amazing. But thank you to her as well. And thank you to everyone who's listening. I will continue to pray for you. I hope that you will share your testimony, that you will share your story, because your story matters and it's so valuable, and your story can help others to continue in their story.
Amen. So, as we always do,
let's pray.
Yes, God, thank you. Thank you. Thank you that we are able to sit here and to hear this incredible testimony that you've given Erin, and all the work that you have done in her life, and all that you're continuing to do in and through her life, Lord. It is beyond anything that we could ever hope or imagine. It's immeasurably more. And Lord, that is who you are, and that's what you do. And God, I just thank you so much that you've given us a story that's part of your greater story. Jesus, thank you for making a way for us. You are the way and the truth and the life. We have life, and we have it abundant because of you. You are always the point, and you always will be. And so, Lord, I just pray that for everyone listening, Lord, that they would know that their story is wrapped up in your greater story. Lord, draw them out of hiding. Help them to open the floodgates, Lord, so that they can walk out this life for you, and that, Lord, you will be glorified and honored as a result. And again, as we say many, many times, and we will continue to do so, you are immeasurably more than all we could ever ask or imagine. In Jesus' name, amen.